We are talking in the WhatsApp community today for the expats here in Nicaragua, and some ideas came up, or some questions or discussion. It was interesting about different ways that people could approach coming to live in Nicaragua. And there's a lot of terms that people were unfamiliar with, so we discussed a lot of different things and kicked some ideas around. And it brought up an important topic that I think way too few people talk about, and that is the creativity that can come into play in becoming a permanent resident in some place such as Nicaragua. We're going to use Nicaragua as an example today and run through a scenario that makes it sound like there's no way that you could possibly move to and become a permanent resident in Nicaragua, and yet in doing so, I think the process is actually really simple, and it just takes a little bit of creativity and thinking outside the box. But I think part of the point is that it's exactly the box Nicaragua expects you to think in, and I think if you went to the government and said, ooh, I came up with this neat way to meet your qualifications by being creative, they'd be like, that's not being creative, that's exactly what we designed the system to do. Isn't that obvious? I think they may be overstating how obvious they think it is, or that it should be. But I think some of these things should be super obvious, but people are so often looking for ways to be ruled out instead of wondering how they get ruled in, that they miss that some of these things are simply designed to encourage you to do things for the purpose of meeting certain qualifications. What do we mean? How does that work? And what is this scenario? We're going to talk about that right after the bump. So we'll start by throwing out a couple of terms. Most of you are going to know these, but some of my audience does not. So let's throw some of these out. First, what is a backpacker? Well, it just means a person who's traveling around from place to place, living out of things that they carry, mostly on their back. But it generally implies someone who is young and not working. It implies a tourist. If you're going to be moving from location to location over time, not becoming a permanent immigrant, we refer to those people as digital nomads. This is not 100% accurate in terminology, but nothing ever is. The actual real way to describe this is as a remote working non-immigrant expat. The term nomad implies non-immigrant expat, but just to make it clear, and a digital is supposed to imply that someone is working online in the digital space, but that is not accurate to any country's definition that I've ever encountered. They actually would allow you to, for example, work by post, and that would be just fine too. There's nothing that actually forces you to work digitally, but realistically, all work in the modern world is digital, and especially if you're working online, it's basically guaranteed, hence why they throw that term around. It became popular once people could work online. So starting with those terms. And digital nomads, while it implies nothing about your age, does have a tendency to be popular with the younger set, those who are under, say, maybe 35, and drops off dramatically for those who are older, especially those above 45. And when you look at a lot of the long-term stay visas here in Nicaragua and a lot of places, you often see ages around 45 being seen as a maturity number where they start to consider your behavior to qualify optionally as a retirement or a retirement style or a slowing down style. So as someone who's over 45, I have a lot of options available to me here in Nicaragua, such as the pensionado and the rentista visas that basically say, okay, you could qualify as someone who's retired. There would be early retirement, granted, but you could qualify as retired. And so we're going to look at your income options from this point of view and allow you to potentially file for residency based on that. And that mentality is key. So if you are young, say you're 18 to 30 and you're working remote and you have the salary and you'd like to qualify for the pensionado or the rentista, you can't. It doesn't matter what you do otherwise creatively. You can't get over the not being 45 years old rule. Now, if you think you have a good reason why you should be considered anyway, certainly talk to an immigration lawyer here in Nicaragua, and they may have and often do have processes for petitioning on your behalf or applying, or they're just knowledgeable of the process and may be able to provide you a lot more insight than I can do on a case-by-case basis, and importantly, more up to date. This video won't post for at least several days, and even what I know is generally months out of date or reasonably, and there's no way to actually know what's going to be coming down the pike in the future. So it's good to check at the time that you're going to do this. So I will be, by the time you see this, too much out of date anyway. But these things don't generally change. These are normal patterns. Just accept that that's how things work. So for most people who are younger and have a salary income, you may think, well, we'll just use, and I have a lot of people say this, we're just going to show my salary. My salary is plenty. It's way above the rentista number. It's way, way above the pensionado number. Why wouldn't they just accept that? Well, I don't know exactly why, but they don't. Salaries do not qualify as a consideration for residency here in Nicaragua. Now, I'm not saying if you have a monthly income of $100,000 that there isn't someone you could convince to waive the requirements. Very possibly. That would be a very logical thing for Nicaragua to do, but I don't know that they will. And with a little bit of creative discussion, I think you'll see why they don't care and why they wouldn't bother waiving it, because it's up to you to waive it, not them, if you know what I mean. You also may be able to petition that the 45 doesn't apply because you have medical conditions or something you need. There's a lot of things. Use creativity. But so your salary doesn't count towards any of these discussions. They don't look at your salary. And you could say, well, I have a lot of money in the bank account. Someone said this to me recently. Oh, I don't have any rentista. I don't have any pensionado, but I have all this money in the bank account. Well, they don't look at bank accounts. You can't just come up with a random view of money and say, oh, use this instead of your rules. No, the rules are the rules. And again, we'll see why that one doesn't count in just a minute. Before we jump into our creative discussion, I just want to do a little housekeeping. I'm Scott Allen Miller. If you'd like to help support the channel and you appreciate the work that we're doing here, consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller. Also, consider sending in your own questions, especially by video. If you don't want to make a video of yourself, that's okay. Get down in the comments, ask a question, say hello, all that stuff. But in the show notes is everything you need to join our social media, like Nika Graham, Nika Loro, join our WhatsApp community. All the links are in there. Nothing in there is paid for. It's all free. And then at the bottom, there's information on how you can send in a video question of yourself. We love it when people do that, so please consider doing that. There's also sponsorship information, the GoFundMe for my producer who has Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 4 cancer, to help her and her family. Thank you. We can look at a lot of the things that Nicaragua is doing with their rules as basically implications as to what their goals are. So we can read their rules and have a pretty good idea of why they're doing what they're doing. So let's do this with the rentista and pensionado first and come up with a cool example for the person who's old enough to retire but has no retirement accounts and solely has a lot of cash in the bank. So from a Nicaraguan perspective, all the things that they're doing with their rules seem to say they want people to have a stable, responsible, long-term income so that no matter how long they're here, they are safe. Now, anybody could destroy their own accounts. Anyone could end up in a legal quagmire. Anyone could have something go massively wrong. There's a certain level of no one's completely assured of anything. But within reason, that's what they want. And so they're looking at that you have sufficient funds and that you have smartly used them. This is important. They want to rule out reckless behavior. And something that would be financially considered ridiculously reckless is holding large sums of money in cash, which includes in savings and checking accounts in banks. That is absolutely reckless in a long-term financial perspective. So showing someone a bank account with all of your money and nothing else, you are proving that you're a dangerous, financially speaking, risk to the company. You could go out and be tricked really easily to give someone your bank account and all your funds are gone. You could very easily simply decide to buy a house and all your funds are gone. You could suddenly decide you want to have a couple cars. All your funds are gone. It doesn't take much to deplete a cash bank account and very little effort, and there's no controls on it whatsoever. And there's nothing to encourage you to keep your money in where it is because it's losing money. You actually have a strong financial incentive to just spend it because that's why it's sitting there. That's its purpose of being liquid. So the last thing they want to see is large amounts of liquidity. That bodes poorly for you in any place that you're going. It's not a good idea for you anyway. So the fact that it's such a bad idea for you, by showing that you're not thinking well about money to the government, is certainly not going to encourage them to let you be a resident. It is handy to show I have lots of money, but you don't want to show that you're treating it poorly and are a high risk. So what could you do? If you had enough money in the bank that Nicaragua would look at it and say, oh, they're a safe bet, then you have an option. And that is to convert that cash, that liquid currency, into rentista income. Pensionado is not something you can just choose. You can't go out reasonably and simply buy a pension, nor would you want to. Pensions are irresponsible and you get forced into them by governments. They are not something that you choose to have. Rentista is what you choose to have when you're making your own financial decisions. So people who have pensions, it's because they worked in government jobs normally and had no choice about how their retirement would be spent. They get less of it, but it is absolutely guaranteed. We talked about this in other videos. You can dig into those to understand why it's reckless and why governments do it to the public, but it is what it is. You're stuck with it, but it's not the best. If you have the choice and you have control of the money, you want to go for rentista, which just means you're earning money from investments. In this case, it would be investments. In my example, we'll use the United States, but it could be investments in Canada, in England, anywhere in the world. It could be in China. Doesn't matter. As long as the money's coming from outside Nicaragua, from your rentista accounts, that could be stocks, it could be bonds, it could be gold accounts, it could be real estate, it could be any number of things. It could be holding of restaurants. You have dividend income coming in based on your investments in them. So if you have enough money in your bank account that if it was invested would return a sufficient amount for rentista, which, in case anyone is wondering, the rentista number is $1,250 USD equivalent per month in dividends. It doesn't have to be every month, it just has to be an average, right? We know that some places pay annually, some places pay quarterly, and so forth. That's not a problem. You just have to show a certain number of years, like 2, I think, of that track record from those accounts, that it averages it over that time. There's no concern. You'll be fine. So don't worry about that. If you have enough money to invest to create that kind of return, and it's in a bank account, simply take it from a bank account, put it into those investments, and generate those returns. So if you have that amount of money today, let's say that's $1 million of cash, and if you're trying to show a bank account with less than $1 million of cash as being sufficient to the government, they're going to laugh at you, because that's not a big bank account when it comes to showing retirement numbers. And of course, your account is smaller if you don't have it as a rentista. It's been shrinking instead of growing. So they will additionally be like, wow, you don't have enough to even begin to do this, and it's getting smaller rather than bigger. Why is your money not working for you? You are bad for us in every possible way. So thinking wisely about this, you can take whatever money you have, even if it's not currently sufficient enough, and start growing it by converting it to rentista. Make Nicaragua the purpose for which you start treating your money wisely. You will start accumulating more money. It will grow. Even if you're nowhere close to the amount that you need, it will keep growing. Remember, you don't have to spend the money that comes out of it. Those dividends should go back into it. So if you are generating enough, let's say you have enough that it generates $1,000 per month, but not the $1,250 that you need, have it reinvest. And every month your account will be $1,000 equivalent, on average, larger than it was the month before. And so over time, in the course of a year, they'll be $12,000 bigger. In 2 years, $24,000 bigger. And after a year, you'll have another $12,000, and that will generate a little bit more money. So in the year following that, you'll grow just a little bit faster. In the year after that, just a little bit faster, and so forth. That's the magic of reinvesting. It keeps getting faster and faster. Plus, if you're able to, keep putting money in from the outside to grow it as fast as possible to get to a number that's going to work for you. Once you get to the number that you need, you can back off, but it's a good process to learn. And remember, you can then come to Nicaragua, live, and keep it. You never have to touch that money. It can just keep growing day after day after day, all by itself, instead of shrinking like it was in your bank account. Nicaragua is protecting you from yourself. So this process, you could say, well, I have enough that in a few years, if I keep adding money to it and it keeps reinvesting, it will eventually get to the $1,250 per month that I need. So what you can do, move to Nicaragua on the border run system. Use living in Nicaragua to make your everyday expenses lower. Have that account reinvesting in itself. Move everything you have in your bank accounts, every penny you can scrape together. Make sure it's all in good, wise reinvesting investment accounts. So, and however you want to do it, right? Rentista is broad thing, right? You could start your own company, any number of things, and let that start generating the money that you need. And then live frugally in Nicaragua and put every extra penny that you can into those accounts so it accumulates even faster. And you often get a long time with the border runs. Years in most cases. Use that time to keep growing that account while living very inexpensively in Nicaragua. And as soon as it is proper, start working with an immigration attorney to figure out how to show that this process is going to be good for you, and they may be able to help buy you time for it to get large enough to show that you can live here permanently. The people that I've talked to that are doing this, keeping money in bank accounts and thinking that showing that recklessness is going to somehow help them, also aren't taking the time to do these things, right? They're not starting this process. And every day that you start this process sooner, the more you're going to have and the longer you're going to get a track record. So let's say it takes 2 years or 3 years to show that you have the necessary proof. Well, you're going to have to live in Nicaragua on the border run system while doing that. But you can do those overlapping. You don't have to wait and live in a high cost location while you start building up that track record. Just stay on the border run system, let this thing accumulate money. You build up a track record of enough money over time, and you'll have everything you need very possibly all at the same time. Or there's some creativity that goes into this, and everyone has a unique situation, but there's often a way to do this, and people just assume they can't, and they don't think about the changes over time, how the investment works, what they need to show, what the goals of the country are, and will often do just really weird things that aren't going to help themselves. So thinking creatively in that way, the rentista may be well within your reach and you just don't realize it. Plus, a lot of people do some amount of work abroad. Now, some people just have a regular job, they pull a salary, and there's nothing they can do about it. If that's you, simply take that money and pour it into your rentista, every extra penny, and leverage that. Chances are, if you have that kind of job, it's paying more than minimum wage, probably a bit more than minimum wage. You could probably be putting a bit away every month on top of whatever savings you have. Getting to those numbers for real retirement is probably way more within your reach than you realize. Figure out how to live frugally, whether it's living at $200 a month while here, $800 a month while here. Figure out what you can get down to and how much living tax-free down here you can put away to build that nest egg as fast as possible. And if you can show really good progress, I guarantee Nicaragua is going to be really flexible on giving you the time to get to where you need to go. Right? I'm a year away from being able to show everything on the rentista. All right, we're going to extend your border run by at least a year. Keep up what you're doing. We're going to be great in a year. We're going to give you residency, right? Work with them, not against them. They want you to be successful. Another thing that people don't often think about doing is converting their salary into dividends. Not everyone can do this, but for a lot of people, you may end up owning your own company in the United States, in Canada, wherever, and then selling yourself as a service to someone else. If you take a regular salary, that's going to show up as a regular salary here in Nicaragua, but you can optionally, by owning your own company, take that income as a dividend. That will show up as a rentista. Now, there are some tax negatives to that, so you don't want to do this casually, but the option exists for an awful lot of people. Not the average person, but many more people than realize it. And for many people, the idea of starting their own company just to do the work they've already been doing abroad doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, but it does create a lot of flexibility that you may not realize and a lot of power. So a lot of people work for themselves. And now some people will point out that I do this. I've been doing it for 25 years. I also have a really large staff with a lot of employees. So I am much more like a traditional investor than I am like a privately employed person. That is in no way the case the way that I am. It makes no sense to look at it that way, but it is important that these processes exist for everyone. They are widely available, easy to do, and while not universally available for the type of income you may have, they are far more available than people realize, far easier and more flexible. So it could end up being a really good thing for you. There's also a possibility, again, this is talk to your lawyer, if you switch from a regular salary for a company you don't own to being paid as a salary through a company that you do own using something like a Class S corporation in the United States, there is some possibility. It was within the realm of reason that you could claim that your salary counts as a dividend, and if you can show that through your lawyer, through your paperwork, exposing things to the Nicaraguan government, they may, at their discretion, accept that because it is a reasonable argument that your own company's salary to you is just another form of dividend, because in the U.S. there are certain circumstances in certain jurisdictions where dividend and salary overlap, and you can't exactly show which is which. So that may be an argument you can make and some creative power you may have. And in that case, you may be able to avoid some of the tax penalties that could happen if you did traditional dividends. I know that's a lot. It's complex. Creativity is key. Talk to your accountants. Ask questions on the forum. Get down in the groups. Send in videos. All those things. We are here to help. I'm not a tax consultant. I'm not a legal consultant, but this is all just standard business stuff that people do every day, and avoiding it is just another way of setting your money on fire. All right, now, the real case that I wanted to talk about is the young investor option. Okay, so you have moved to Nicaragua, or you're thinking about moving to Nicaragua. You have a salary coming from the U.S. It could be minimum wage, but that would be tough, but plausible. But let's say you're making a little bit more, about $11 per hour, and you're working full-time. That's 168 hours per month. If you're lucky, you're making any bit more than that, maybe $12, $13 an hour. You'll be golden. And if you have any amount of overtime coming in, maybe you're working 178 hours per month, just that little extra 10 hours of overtime will make a huge difference to the calculations that we're doing. Grab a calculator while we're doing this. Take that 168 hours per month and multiply that by $11 an hour, $12 an hour, whatever you have. See what that number is per month. What I recommend is this, and this is assuming you are starting from zero. Your savings is zero. You have nothing, and you are currently working in the U.S. If you move to Nicaragua right now, you are not going to have anything to show for any type of visa whatsoever, except, of course, tourist. Absolutely, you can get a tourist visa, no problem whatsoever. So you can come to Nicaragua today and live here and work remotely as you have been doing, assuming your job allows you to do that or doesn't know that you left. If you put all this together, what you're able to do is lower your cost of living. Live here in Nicaragua, preferably under $800 a month. Yeah, that's super frugal, but we're trying to solve a problem here. You're going to live under $800 a month, which we have people in the community here, that's their full income and they're living on it and perfectly happy. In theory, you could get that below 600. In a stretch, you could get it below like 300, but that would be truly pushing the realms of reality. So that's why people who are making $7.25 an hour at 168 hours a month, you're going to be in really tight shape. But if you can get that up to 200 hours a month, get that up to $11 an hour, and stay at the 168, whatever, then you're going to fix these things really quickly. If you make that $11 per hour and no overtime at all, it's easy to see that you'd be bringing in $1,800 a month. Live on 800, bank 1,000. Just put it right into a bank, or better, like we just said, an investment account so it's making a little bit of money. But it's hard to do with only $1,000. But as we're going through this, it'll grow. So maybe after a few months, you can put it into something. But just save it in the bank. Do not allow any of it to be spent for any purpose. Figure out how to live on 800 or less. Try to at least not live above 750, and every month have a little bit of nest egg within the part you're allowed to spend so that you're ready for something to happen. Just be super frugal and live with it. You're young, figure out how to go dancing for free or something. Entertain yourself very cheaply. As you do this, come down and live in Nicaragua. You're going to be tax-free because of your income, assuming you're coming from like the United States. You're going to have, and at that number, generally you're not paying taxes anyway, but you have that a little bit of lower cost of living. Don't get a car. Save that $1,000 a month. That means after a year, you're going to have $12,000. After 2 years, you're going to have $24,000. After 3 years, you're going to have $36,000. And that's assuming no investment growth. That is just the cash sitting in the bank. So if you do this and you truly manage to put away $1,000 per month, if you do anything and are able to put away more than $1,000 a month, $1,100, $1,200, this will happen really fast. Do your border runs. Do your living here as a digital nomad system that is perfect for when you're young. In just 2.5 years, or possibly much less, you can accumulate, especially if you start with any amount of money or make a little bit extra, you will get up to the $30,000 number that you need for investor visas. Now, investor visas do not require an age number, or they do, but you have to be an adult. Like, it's a very low number. So you're able to invest in Nicaragua. And this is good for a lot of reasons, right? You're making an investment that you could potentially be involved in. In theory, you could make this an investment that's actually good for you. It's not going to make enough to live on, I guarantee. It's not going to be some magic thing, but you may create something of value. You've got 2.5 years to evaluate the country and figure out what kind of investment would be valuable for you. And you may be able to jump in as an investor with some other group and just go into a working business and add a little bit of capital. Or you may start a business of your own that you could work in, or you could be involved in, or you could run out of the building that you're already doing your online work out of, or whatever. Make this an actual investment that you try to make a small amount of money on. What if it's $100 a month, $200 a month that eventually comes back as a return? That's not going to be enough to live on, but supplementing your small income that you have already, it will be noticeable. Now, keep in mind, once you do this, you don't have to keep reinvesting in theory. Hopefully your business will be able to keep growing, maybe just the tiniest bit, but over time be a little bit larger, and you only need to show any amount of continuing business in the country every 5 years when you're on that investor visa. And so you're in a really great shape by going through this process. Now, again, it doesn't apply to everyone, but if you have this foreign income in the form of a salary and you need to convert it into the form of local investments, you have that creative option. And of course, you can do something similar with rentistas and build that as well, but that would take a lot longer to do in the same way. But if, however you feel comfortable, whatever makes the most sense for you, this is just some examples of how you can creatively think about how your money is currently sourced and what you're going to do with it in the future. You would need to approach things differently depending on your age, the aversion to risk, whether you want to be 100% all in on Nicaragua or you want something that is more flexible that you can do from other countries at other times and move around from place to place, whether you're focused on being a digital nomad or you want to be able to retire based on this process, and so forth. There's a lot of factors to consider, but the point is that many people have some form of income, they have some form of savings, they have some form of plans, and they often perceive that slight problems in age or the form of their investments or the current state of them is such that they cannot pursue the life that they want. And in some cases that may be true, but very often there is a path, especially given that Nicaragua generally gives you quite a lot of flexibility in approaching this, where you can potentially, almost certainly, move to Nicaragua today and find a way to get started and get to a point that either the pensionado, the rentista, or the investor visas are going to be within your reach within the necessary time span. And as long as you're working with the government, you're working with a lawyer, they're having these conversations, you're doing a good job, you're really honestly trying, you can show progress, you can show your plan in action, you have a great story to go to Migracion, who's in charge of these things, and present, here's where I am along the path, here's what I'm doing to get there, here's what is going to be this, perfect future. I have this wrong type of income, right? But I'm going to have the right type of income. I'm in the process of converting it. I'm doing good things for Nicaragua so that I can continue to do good things for Nicaragua. We're all going to be on the same page. I just need this amount of time. Here's the projections. They're there to work with you. They want you to be successful. They want you to come to Nicaragua. They want to see how much dedication you have to this process, right? That's going to look fantastic when you're dealing with them. So don't be discouraged. Be creative. Get the right people involved from the beginning and say, what do I need to do to make my process work? And this came about because someone asked me, they were sure, and no matter how much I explained this, they couldn't get over. They didn't understand some of the words, therefore they were not eligible to move anywhere in the world. They were trapped somewhere that cost way more than Nicaragua. That makes no sense for them to be trapped in, but they feel that they're trapped because they don't like the idea of investing and they want to hold their money in cash. And unfortunately, if that is an overwhelming emotional goal that you must meet, then Nicaragua is going to see you as a risk, because legitimately you must be, unless that number in the bank account is just millions upon millions of dollars, you are actually a risk. That financial negligence to yourself means that you are at very high risk of not being able to protect yourself over time, and then putting Nicaragua at risk because you're not willing to approach protecting your own financial resources in a reasonable way. So you have a path to change that decision, to protect yourself, to make more money, to be safer. But if liquid capital is more important to you than the amount of money you have and your own protections, then unfortunately, very likely Nicaragua is going to have to agree with your own assessment that it's not something that's going to work out for you and Nicaragua together, but that is completely an option that is being chosen and not a requirement. I've never met a person yet who didn't have a clear path to being able to move to Nicaragua and a clear ability to qualify for a visa. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. If you'd like to help support the channel, again, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com and /Scott Helen Miller. Everything's in the show notes. Everything's on the screen. Check out the show notes for our link on how to support my producer Marcela in her fight against Hodgkin's lymphoma and helping her and her 2 children. She is a single mom. Of course, if you want to send in any video questions, all the information is in the show notes as always. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Say hello. Engage with other people on the channel. Let us know about your challenges in finding a visa. Ask your questions about it. Let's do some sample breakdowns on here. That would be a lot of fun. And share on social media. Tell a friend about the show. I will see all of you tomorrow.